How much we've learned about technology in the past 6 months.
Did that work? Did you hear Mike?
No, it was still very unintelligible.
Try it a different way.
Morning, Andy, Mike Number.
Yeah, I could hear him that time, but again, Jeff, you may have to repeat some things.
Well, I may have to repeat some questions or comments then. We'll do our best. Well, I assume people can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. They may not want to, but they can. All right. Well, where's the echo coming from? Are we still getting an echo? Okay,
just slightly, Jeff. Not that much.
Okay, we're going to get organized to get going here. We're having a few technical challenges. We'll do the best we can. Hold on one second. Yes, sir. There was an email, but just do this. For any http:// council, Cuyahoga County, cuyahogacounty.us /en /streaming -video -cmb.aspx. And if you have an issue, contact Steve Zanoni at aboutpmc.com and he'll help, because we're starting right now. Okay. That's right, but that's what we're using for the live stream. All right, thanks. Okay. Okay, we are going to get started. Not sure where that echo is. Where's our tech individual? Jeff, can you do something about the echo?
Between me and you. I don't know what copy she gave you. I don't know what. Listen, between.
Okay, so let me just, in a second, I'm going to start with the roll call. Let me just say
I can be
that there is an email that's coming to everybody that is on the Zoom meeting, which is really our steering committee and staff. And you will have in that email a printout of the presentation we're using today. Everybody else, it's going to be posted on the county website. What you will receive are more pages than what we are using today, because what we've done, we have a very long, it's a long presentation, a lot of material, there's a lot of backup information. And so there are pages that are in your printout that we will not be reviewing today. Andy will reference them, or I'll reference them. They're in your printout, but we'll continue to tell you what page we are on, because there is backup information. And Steve, do you know if that's gone out yet? And it has gone out yet. So you should have emails if you want. Of course, it'll all be up on this site. So what we're going to do now, Andy, if you can go to the next page and the next page. So we are going to start today. This is a really, I think it's an important meeting. We have important resolutions I'm going to walk through in a couple minutes, or determinations. But let me begin first of all with a roll call to see who we have. And this may take a minute because we have people who are both on Zoom and here in person. But first of all, I think I did see Mr. Budish. I think
I'm here.
Mr.
I'm
Budish.
just no camera.
That's okay. Thank you. So Mr. Budish is here. Mr. Gallagher is here with us in person. Ms. Bird.
I'm sorry, Ms. Bird is here. Ms. Bird is
Okay.
here.
Bird is here. Judge Sheehan.
I'm present. Good morning.
Okay, Judge Sheehan is present, and also Judge Russo is here in the room. Judge Celebrezzi
I'm here.
is here. Judge Early.
Here.
Ms.
Here.
Lang Henry. Mr. Kelly. Do we have Mr. Kelly or a representative of Mr. Kelly's? Okay, hopefully he will sign in at some point. The sheriff or a representative of the sheriff? Okay, Bob Corey is here representing the sheriff. Ms. Bates, did I see her? Okay, I know she accepted the invitation, so hopefully she will show up during this. Mr. O'Malley?
Here.
Is here. And Mr. Stanton is here in person. Okay, so we have a couple more that hopefully will sign. Well, Judge Anthony Russo's not on the committee. He's invited, but he's not on the committee. I just mentioned you were here just to pay homage. That's the only reason I did that. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's our roll call. Just a little bit about housekeeping and protocol today. The way we are doing this is there is a live stream that has gone out to a much larger group of people who are interested. So this is being live streamed right now. And the way this works, on Zoom, we have the steering committee members and some of their immediate staff. We found out last time that we just had too many people on Zoom to manage it effectively.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jeff, I believe Kevin Kelly just joined.
Oh, hi. Okay, Mr. Kelly's here. Thank you. And so we're just waiting for, I think Ms. Bates then would be the only additional steering committee member. And when she shows up, we'll note that. But thank you. So what we're doing, so we have it live streamed. The PowerPoint is also being posted. Members of the steering committee are on Zoom, and we've emailed to you the presentation, although we will see it here. There is a public comment section. For anybody who is live streamed, you can, and it's right in the beginning of your agenda, you can send an email to my colleague, Mr. Zanoni. And if we've received comments before any determinations, we'll read them in connection with the determinations. If you have a comment during the meeting, we do have a comment section at the end. And we will read any comment that we get. Obviously, it has to be relevant to what we're talking about. And it has to be in proper taste, but assuming there's nothing objectionable, we will read your comments at the end of the meeting as well. So if we can go on to the next slide then, Andy. So this is an important meeting. We have 4 determinations that we are going to be talking about. And I want to spend just a few minutes actually to talk about each of these determinations. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to tell you a little bit about the determinations so you have them clearly in mind what we're talking about today. Then we're going to spend the next several hours going through very detailed information relating to these determinations. And then at the end of the meeting, we will ask for a vote on the determinations of the committee. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the determinations in advance, just so that when we start to go through the presentation and the material, you have in mind why we're going through the material. So these determinations largely relate to the jail, although they obviously impact and limit the continued consideration for what we're thinking about with respect to the courts. So determination number one, the steering committee determines that it is impractical to renovate or expand jail 1 or jail 2, and that future jail planning should be limited to consideration of a new jail on a site outside of the Cleveland downtown core. We're talking about the Cleveland downtown business core, with an initial rated capacity to be determined. We still will have time to adjust it, but it's not going to exceed 1,600 beds. That's what we have always agreed upon in this committee, that we need to get this down to, with flexibility for either reduction in initial size, so it could be smaller, or the facility will be capable of expansion up to a rated capacity of 2,400. Now, just a little bit of background on this for everybody to remember. Back in January, before the pandemic, we actually had gone through exhaustive information about what it meant to renovate these jails versus build new. At that point in time, the committee at that time said, we want you to continue to study 3 options. And none of those 3 options involved renovation of the jail. At that time, the committee had pretty much determined that you cannot renovate these jails and would not want to renovate these jails. Now, we did at that point in time agree to consider a 4th option. Judge Sheehan said, I still want you to study side by side what the cost and issues would be if we continued to look to renovate jail 1 and jail 2, and we agreed to do that. I will also tell you that over the summer, even though we weren't meeting, we continued to get additional requests for studies. We studied 2 other options. One option we studied was, well, what if we split the jail and had a short-term use of the jail for pretrial? So jail 2, in other words, would be for those who are still in pretrial status and would be easy for the judges to call. But there would be a longer-term facility, so a split facility, and we gave that exhaustive study. Then at the last meeting, there was one more hypothetical that was proposed by Mr. O'Malley. He said, what if we were really successful in keeping the jail population down, and let's say we had it down at 1,000? In that point in time, would it still make sense to build a new jail, or would it make sense to then renovate jail 2 or do something on the current site with current jails? And we exhaustively studied that as well since the last meeting. So you'll see all of those. Keep in mind that with this determination, 1,600 beds means that our jail population is at 1,350 because you design the housing units for, you really want 85% of that total because you need some flexibility. So that's really the number that we're targeting. To get to 1,600, we need to be down to 1,350. So that is the first determination. Now, each of these determinations builds on the next, on the prior determination. So if we determine, number 1, that we are in fact going to go ahead and limit our future consideration to a new campus jail, and by this, just to be clear, we are talking about a low-rise, flexible jail, 15, it would be, if it was a 2/2, it would be 15 acres. If it was a 1 level, it would be more like 30 acres, and we'll talk about that in detail. Now we go to determination 2. The steering committee determines that the preferred remaining options for consideration are for a new jail on a separate site outside of the downtown Cleveland core. We would have already decided that. And a new courthouse within the downtown Cleveland core. That was previously our option 3C. Or a new jail on a separate site and renovation expansion of the courthouse on the current site. The steering committee determines that further consideration shall not be given to a new combined jail courthouse facility. So what is this really all about? What we're saying here is there's 2 options that we're going to continue to talk about. One option is we we do this new campus jail, and then we talk about a new standalone courthouse in the downtown Cleveland core. This was, by the way, the most preferred option when we pulled this back in January. The second possibility, we do the campus jail, but we continue to look at renovating the current courthouse only, not jail, current courthouse only. There would have to be some expansion because if we're bringing the domestic courts over, the domestic relation court over, there's not enough room or space in that building. And there would have to be some expansion on that site to accommodate it. Those two options would remain. What are we not considering anymore? We would not consider any form of a combined jail courthouse. We would not consider a combined jail courthouse downtown because that would mean that we'd have to build a new high-rise courthouse next to a new high-rise or a new high-rise jail next to a high-rise courthouse or even a mid-rise courthouse. We wouldn't have 15 or 30 acres in the downtown core area, nor would it be efficient or effective to do that. So that's out. And we're not going to move a courthouse out of the downtown core. Everyone has said it is more important to have the courthouse downtown and to have the campus jail. And there was no appetite for moving the courthouse out of the downtown area. So that option is eliminated also. So that would mean that our future determination, we're moving forward with the jail, but we're limited to those continuing two courthouse options to stay. Let's go to determination number 3. Determination number 3. Now, this gets back to the jail. Obviously, we now have to focus on, if we're going to do this campus jail, where is it going to be? And we have proposed the criteria. Once again, the steering committee approves of the criteria for the site investigation. So this says the steering committee determines that the proposed siting criteria for the new jail as agreed at this meeting, and we will propose the criteria in this meeting, is appropriate, and the county should proceed to identify and provide comparative evaluation of potential sites. Now, we have talked about in the last meeting, we published what we thought was the appropriate criteria. We also have published the criteria scoring sheet. It is attached to this agenda. We'll go over it again today. I think that is, a lot of that's pretty common sense, but we'll go over it and make sure there's no disagreement on that. And then the fourth determination builds on everything else. This is to say now we can proceed with action. What does it mean? Steering committee determines that the county should proceed with planning now for the new standalone jail. What are the immediate steps? And as I've always said from day one, we have to be doing things in parallel. Number one, we actually initiate the site exploration and selection process. So we now, with the criteria, start the process of identifying sites and scoring potential sites. Number two, we prepare and issue the RFQ for the jail criteria architect. At this point in time, on the jail at least, we are now moving into design. We're actually going from program to specific, at least initial. We're going to confirm the program and then move into schematic design. Now, at a point in time, though, the criteria architect does have to have a specific site in mind. And by the way, the criteria architect will have something to say about evaluating the site. So we look at different sites and we do some test fits. So it's important to get the criteria architect on board while we are going through the site exploration and selection process, because we need to test fit sites at the same time that we're reviewing sites. So those are parallel activities that have to occur. And by the way, the RFQ for the criteria architect, once again, we are not just looking for someone who designs buildings. This criteria architect still has to have expertise in terms of justice systems. We are still interested in a building that accommodates the justice system. This means, thinking through population management issues, thinking through best practices. It's not just a building designer. It's still an entity that has the capability to help us and think through best justice systems. That's part of the credentials or qualifications for this type of an architect. Number three, commence work on the creation of the capital financing plan and structuring of the required agreements with appropriate stakeholders. Once you go down this path, we have to start thinking about how we're going to do our financing plan. We know that we have a lot of savings, but we know that we have to look at how this is going to be done. And then we have to look at who partners are and how they are involved. the city, the city-county relationship on this and perhaps other municipalities, the legal agreements and the agreements that have to be put in place, that work has to commence. Now, this is not to leave the court planning behind. As part of determination number 4, we are saying that concurrently, the steering committee shall continue and conclude initial planning for the courthouse to allow an informed decision regarding the most appropriate approach for meeting the current and future needs of the courts and related agencies. At the same time that we commence the jail planning process, we are still considering what happens with the courts. Now, one last comment about this before we proceed. The fact that we are starting the next stage of jail planning does not reduce flexibility. As we're going through this planning process, we are still considering the ultimate number that we plan to. We can increase or decrease the number of housing units until we get through the end of that planning process with the criteria architect. We can make modifications, but we need to get started because this is a extensive amount of work that needs to be done. Andy, I'm going to ask you before I turn it over to you, please check one more time since I've turned hosting capability to you. Make sure there's no one in the waiting room. I'm going to make one more statement, then I'm going to turn.
Jeff, I have been doing that. There have been other people joining.
Okay, thank you.
Also, Jeff, Kim Bates from the clerk's office is in the bill,
Okay, thank you. So that means that we now have all 12 members of the steering committee who are here. So that's great. So one of the issues is, and we've talked about this before, the cost. We are going to highly recommend as consultants moving forward right now with the jail, with the planning process, because there's still time involved to get this done. And aside from all the issues involving the inherent issues with the jail in terms of how, all of our jail folks tell us the difficulties of working in that jail, the human issues that are involved, health and those issues, but there's also a very significant cost issue. Every day that we delay doing something with the jails, we are incurring significant costs and avoiding the possibility of mitigating those costs. So we are going to start with a little presentation about what those costs are, the reason for acting now and the cost of delay. So Andy, I'm going to turn it over to you for that.
Do you want to go through the rest of the agenda first, Jeff?
Yeah, well, I can do that. So the rest of the agenda, after we talk about the cost of further delay, we're going to give you a very quick update on what's going on with diversion initiative, a very quick update on interim central booking. And then we are going to have a discussion of population management initiatives and potential impact on our planning. There was a large conversation about, well, did we learn something in COVID? Does it change our planning? We'll go through that. Then, and I'm not going to go into this in detail, then we're going to go through and do the review and comparative evaluation of all the jail options. We're going to tell you why, for the second determination, why we are limiting ourselves to 2 options, because we have done extensive cost study, extensive operational study, and we think that, as far as this consulting team is able to do it, we have our recommendations, and this has been studied left and right, up and down. There's just no more study that we think is required at this point in time. So, and then we're going to go through the 4 determinations, have public comment, and then just talk about the next meeting. So that is this very aggressive agenda, a lot to talk about. We're going to start right now with the analysis of the reason for acting now.
And as Jeff indicated, there are some slides in your packet that we do not have live, but if there are questions about the backup information, we can look at that. Much of it is information we have shared in prior meetings and in the working groups that we had in preparation for today. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about is the reason for acting now.
Hold on 1 second, Andy. Is this only coming through mine? Okay, just a second. We have to make a technical adjustment here for the room.
Okay.
Everybody in the world can hear you, but the people in this room can't, so we have to adjust this. Do you want me to turn my volume up, by the way? All right, well, isn't it more important that Andy be talking? Andy, count to 10.
Count to 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That's how you count to 10?
I do everything backwards.
By the way, for everyone, we're relying on the expertise of our consultant who just demonstrated how to count to 10. So we're going to have a little problem now. Try it again, Andy. Count to 10 one more time, Andy. Think about the question. We're testing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
What do you want me to do? Oh, all right, I think we're okay, Andy.
Try it again. Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. Good. All right. So as Jeff indicated, one of the things to frame this discussion is why are we asking the steering committee to move forward today? It's really based upon what would be the cost of further delay to solving the jail problem. As some of you know, in 2014, there was a very, very detailed study done of existing conditions, which was based upon simply fixing up the buildings as is. With limited upgrade, it excluded Americans with disability. It excluded a full renovation fixture replacement. It excluded some of the things we're learning from COVID about mechanical systems. So that put a price on it in 2014 dollars of about $105 million. We've added to that the cost of a security upgrade to all the systems in the jail, and also looking at how it would be renovated as occupied, which takes us to a basic cost of about $156 million. And when we look at project costs with contingencies in today's dollars, this is a 2014 study adapted to today's dollars, the cost of fixing the existing building to have another 20-year life would be $207 million without any functional upgrades. Since that time, there's been a lot of other things that have been looked at. There have been some improvements. There's some things budgeted, but in talks with Public Works, there's a lot of major other issues which were not covered in that study. Replacement of the sanitary sewer system throughout due to age and leakage, domestic water system replacement, housing unit fixtures, basically every fixture in every cell just from age and use. Is at the point where we'll probably need replacement because replacement parts are difficult to obtain. As we indicated, this did not include ADA, this did not include full upgrade to the facility. So if you look at the top of this, we recently did a very similar project for the Clark County Jail in Las Vegas, Nevada, which was built in 1984, which is in about the middle between Jail 1 and Jail 2. If we adjust that price of a full upgrade of a facility while occupied, we'd be closer to about $303 or $304 million just to fix up the existing buildings. Which would be, and the reason we put this on here is because obviously eventually this is a comparison of debt service. If we did it with a bond, that would require about $15 million a year of bond service. If we tried to do it over a 10-year period with escalation, we'd be spending $40 million a year. If we continued at the level of the capital budget of the county now, which is roughly $5 million for everything it's done, it's basically a 60-year process, which by that time we'd be continuing that expense. So what does that mean in terms of cost avoidance? Right now, based on our estimates, which we'll talk about a little later in the presentation for a new jail, the cost of a year's delay in escalation is close to $30 million. As we've talked about before, we see substantial operating cost savings in moving from the existing jails to a new jail, which at the low side is estimated at about $12 million. And to a certain extent, we believe that the physical plant is impacting some of the issues related to litigation, as well as care and treatment of the folks that are in our custody. We can't put a number on that, but it can be a significant cost. So the annual cost to do nothing is probably in the range of $45 million. for every year that we would not move forward. And again, I think, Jeff, the determination does not commit us to spending this money next year. It simply means we're going to start the process so that we don't incur more delay in moving forward.
Yeah, keep in mind that even if there was a decision not to move forward today, if 2 years from now, people said, you know, things have gotten worse now, we really have to move forward, you still have to put the planning process, the process that we are recommending you go through, which is a, you know, up to a, you know, 6 months to a year process. You're going to have to do that anyway. So the point is, we think you need to do that, and actually it can be less than that if we can do it effectively. But the point is, you're going to have to do that anyway. We're simply saying, do it now, and hopefully we're ready to pull the trigger. But even if not, you're not wasting anything, because eventually you're going to have to do that anyway. And so we think it's critical to move forward. But this is not exaggerated. This is really what the cost is, because we're continuing to pour money into the buildings. Eventually, those buildings are not going to be usable, and the cost to renovate or the cost to build new, we're going to see some pretty significant escalation. It's already happening, by the way. It's not happening in other parts of the economy. Construction escalation is happening right now. We're seeing this in everyone thought the costs would go down. They're not. Just so you'll know. So go ahead.
So as we look at the cost of comparison of the new versus keeping what we have, as we go through our estimate, you'll see that we're looking at the project cost being about $500 million for a new jail at 1,600 beds on a new site. The financing cost for that would be about $25 million a year. If we look at the annual debt service, if we renovated and operational savings, the equation has a net savings to the county, because the differential between renovation and upgrade and the potential operational savings, which we'll explain as we go through the presentation today, actually works in the county's favor to look at the new jail, which, by the way, anything we would do with renovations under this scheme does not address any of the major functional deficiencies of the existing jail. It's basically fixing up what we have, addressing Americans with Disability Act issues and other code and system related issues. One of the things which makes me very, very proud to be part of this project is the steering committee in the county moving forward with a diversion initiative. As we talk today about setting a capacity, 1,600 bed rated capacity means we're planning for an average daily population of around 1,350, which today we're in the neighborhood of 1,550. But the county is moving forward with the initiative to do non-secure diversions. So Cheryl and Judy, if you could give us just a brief update on where we're at with that, thank you.
Good morning. The county is moving forward with its diversion initiative. It's based on the results of the mental health and substance abuse addiction diversion study that was completed in January, which provided a framework for a full diversion continuum. The county's moving forward at this juncture with a focus on persons who are in crisis, who are subject to arrest, who could be diverted from the jail. And so they are looking to create an assessment and diversion center with the target population from 50 to 150 beds to serve those populations. In addition, to create a 24-hour call-in helpline for law enforcement to help better identify what the intervention should be, as well as crisis intervention training for all law enforcement within Cuyahoga County. Next slide. So in its initial efforts, the county has solicited some proposals. They issued an RFI, a request for information, in February based on the results of the study, and to begin to identify what the community felt was an appropriate response for diverting these individuals. Based on that and the results of the framework outlined in the study, an RFP was issued in May a collaborative was selected and was top ranked and was moving forward until such time that the proposal was withdrawn because St. Vincent had withdrawn their beds, and that was a critical component. It left us with no facility. So the RFP was reissued in September. 3 proposals were submitted. The county's now in the process of evaluating and identifying its path forward in regards to those proposals received.
And as part of the emphasis on diversion, while this is looked at short-term diversion, folks coming off the street, stabilization, the county's also looking for what can be done based on some lessons learned from our virtual tour of Bear County, Cheryl.
Yeah.
They're also looking for companion facilities for longer-term treatment for those who need it. So I think this is very, very positive in terms of getting the numbers down in the future.
Absolutely. And this particular one is just focusing on pre-arrest. There's certainly plans to look at folks when they actually do come to jail or even before they encounter law enforcement. So it's a complete continuum, and they're just taking steps to begin to initiate that continuum.
So there should be, as the county continues evaluation, there should be an announcement sometime in the future about implementing the program and moving forward.
Yes.
Andrew, on that note,
Andrew?
Did we have a question?
Yes. I don't know how to pose it, but yes. Well, my question is that what type of time frame are we looking on the diversion centers? This whole process started back in February. It actually probably started before then, but certainly as I sit here, I continue to see a critical need for these diversion centers. And I just think we need to put as much energy as we can to immediately. We saw another tragedy this week again in our county jail. And I wonder how long this is going to continue to drag out while this county is in dire need of diversion centers.
Did you guys hear that question?
Yes. I'll repeat it for those. As I understand, the question is, when are we actually going to see movement forward on the diversion center, because it is a critical need rather than it drag out further? Is that correct, Mr. O'Malley?
Correct.
I believe that right now, and I would defer to the county, where they are in negotiations with the proposers in order to finalize the agreement. So I would hope that we would see action on this before the first quarter of next year. I would defer to Mr. Budish and Mr. Mason for further discussion.
Bill is here. Did you want to say something about this, Bill?
Yeah. We are negotiating with.
I can't hear nothing.
Okay, hold on a minute. Can we get so Bill can be heard, or does it have to be in here?
Yeah.
Okay, try it again. I'll repeat it if I can't hear it.
Yeah. The diversion decision is in with weeks of being able to pick who will be the provider of the services. So thereafter, it's a matter of determining where we're going to be located and how soon we can get started.
Okay, but yeah, I don't know if you could hear that, but what Bill said was, well, could you hear that? No. All right. So what Bill said, and we'll try to fix that in a minute, was that we are within weeks of getting the final determination made as to the provider, working on the final issues on the location, and it's proceeding at pace as quickly as possible thereafter. So, you know, the expectation is that it's going to occur just as quickly as possible as these details are worked out. I guess that's a fair statement of what you said, Bill.
I just want to note that, and my other concern is that when I look to see that we're maybe talking 150 beds, I think previous analysis of the population of the county jail determined, like, I forgot whether it was like 30 or 40% of the people in the county jail are taking medication for mental health issues. And it seems to me that 150 beds is a drop in the bucket as to what is really needed.
Okay, let me repeat that. Mr. O'Malley, and I don't know if we can fix this a little bit in the room. What Mr. O'Malley said was he wonders why it is only 150 beds, given the fact that prior analysis has demonstrated a much higher number of individuals who are fundamentally in jail because of SMI and issues.
Jeff, I'll defer to Judy and Cheryl for the detail, but if you recall, we went through with the steering committee an analysis of the population based upon charges, what they were charged for, what we'd be willing to release to community service. And that's where the starting number came from. Once the program starts to work, we may be able to expand it, but it's based upon starting smaller and growing. Secondly, and as we go through the jail program, there is still a large percentage of the population which, due to offense, will be held in secure confinement because they present either public risk, a risk to themselves, or they may not show up for trial. They will be held in secure, and we have made provisions for expanded treatment within a secure environment. If you may recall, when we started down this road, there was discussion about moving these folks off-site to a hospital, but yet they were in secure confinement. That has extreme operational costs and safety and security issues attached to it. Instead, we have built into the program for the new jail robust treatment facilities for those who must be held in secure confinement. Cheryl?
Absolutely, Andy. And Mr. O'Malley's right. The number was much higher, but once we filtered it out, as Andy said, based on criminal history, assaultiveness, there were some other criteria. It really decreased the number that might be eligible for pre-arrest or diversion from the jail. This is just focusing on pre-arrest. There'll be another opportunity to divert folks during admission to the jail. Rather than coming in, they may be directly diverted from there, particularly those with maybe a bit more serious charges. So, and as Andy had said, once the program is established and operational, they may be able to put safeguards in place to put more folks into the diversion center.
Those of you who have the packet will see several slides that we're not going to present today about the lessons learned from our Bexar County virtual tour. If you recall, we were going to make a physical tour. Obviously, COVID impacted our ability to travel and see other things, so we did do a virtual tour. Bexar County started exactly the same way with a smaller program which evolved over time to the point to where it was able to do exactly what we've been talking about, which is to reduce a jail population which has at times approached 3,000 to a planning number of 1,350.
So we're gonna have to run time-wise. There's a lot of slides and information. We can get more into this, but the recommendation is that this is the solid core that we know meets all the criteria to immediately get into this program. It's a minimum, not a maximum, and it can grow once it's successful. But we can get into that detail. But right now, Andy, I think we do have to move on. We have quite a bit to consider for the determinations today.
All right, and basically wanted to give you a very brief update on interim central booking. I'm on what's now slide 21. You'll see other slides in your packet, which will be put on the website, which includes information from our virtual tour of the Harris County Central Booking Facility. The county is evaluating how to best accommodate this within Jail 1, also how to accommodate it with an appropriate budget amount, especially if today we make a determination to move ahead with the new facility quicker. But a critical issue which needs to be addressed, which is getting the stakeholders together to finalize what the staffing needs are and to finalize what the operational policy and procedure is to make this work. Because again, this is another critical issue ultimately in population management, from charge reduction to diversion, to making better release decisions, The city, for example, when we talk about population management in a moment, has continued to focus on their pretrial release program to drive the pretrial population, city population down in the jail, and picking that up at the Court of Common Pleas level and working with all the stakeholders, the prosecutor, Mr. O'Malley, public defender, Mr. Stanton, the clerk, in terms of bonding, is extremely important that we start to focus on that process to make it work. We expect to have an idea of what our final physical solution should be within the next week to 10 days.
Once again, the key to this though is we have spent a lot of time thinking about the physical solution, and then trying to figure out what operationally can fit within the physical solution. It's really, frankly, much more important to think about the operational solution. That is what comes first. And really, we got to quit focusing so much on the physical solution until we really have nailed down operationally who's going to participate and how it's going to work. And that's why this large statement is made here. Go ahead, Andy.
Jeff, before I move on, you may want to confirm that Ms. Bates has joined us.
She has. She had quite a while ago.
Okay.
We did that. Go ahead.
I've been trying to watch.
I'm here.
She's here.
I'm here.
Thank you. I've been trying to watch the entry as I go through this. So
yeah, I think we're all set. I think we've had the entire committee for some time.
Have all the details so that they only have. I spoke to their teacher last night.
I can't make out what's being said right now. Yeah, that was probably someone's open mic. Okay, go ahead, Andy.
All right. A brief discussion of population management, because the issue has come up. Can we reduce the jail population process? We had two working group discussions, one on the 1st of October and one on the 22nd of October. With the first meeting, we had tremendous participation from the city stakeholders. The second one, we started to add the county stakeholders. And what the purpose was to understand what have we done during COVID to drive the population down and what is sustainable. And this has to continue to be an ongoing discussion if we are going to be able to have a long-term reduction in the jail capacity. Basically, at times the numbers have actually went as low as 900 ADP in the jail. And here's what we saw that's been done that can continue. The city has effectively reduced their population from the original contract of 240 beds to 120 beds to now they're at an ADP of 52, and even with some adjustments, they do not see the city pretrial population going above 80. Part of that is due to a focus on for cooperative, non-violent, non-sex related charges to do cite and release. Only violent, non-cooperative, and sex offender misdemeanors are taken in detention. The city felt a lot of the things that they started to do are sustainable, especially with the focus on keeping that pretrial population down. Some things, we looked at were probably not sustainable. Suspension of grand juries and indictments, refraining from sentencing. There's a huge limited prosecution of F5s now, and the suspension of probation for technical violations. While those actions specifically were not defined as sustainable, there is the potential to look for ways to adjust that, perhaps more direct filing, sentencing options, charge reductions for F5s through central booking and earlier charge review. And on technical violations, is there a way, if as we continue to sanction offenders for not living up to their conditions of probation, is there a way to reduce the number of jail days before they have a hearing? It was felt that video hearings can continue, and continuing the cooperation with the bail project where there is cash bail to effectuate release could continue. Bail case court action is something that cannot continue. We know there's been sentencing review, especially for some of the municipal court sentencing to lead to early release that can continue. And the stakeholders, along with the jail staff, have really been focused on jail population management, and that's something that really can continue. The kind of weekly, daily review of who's in jail for what reason, and can we do releases. One of the things we did want to point out, there was a lot of discussion about the impact of ODRC being the major source for the jail population. And quite frankly, if you look pre-COVID, the numbers that were awaiting transfer were from 17 to 22%, which is even greater than where we're at today. The bigger issue right now that we identified for ODRC is whenever we have a quarantine unit and we're ready to transfer somebody, a group, and one of the persons in that quarantine unit suddenly tests positive, that whole group has to stay longer. And that's also a concern simply in the length of stay that people are staying in the jail. But it's really kind of that trap door that they're tested before they're transferred. If one person in a group of 20 tests positive, that whole group has to continue quarantine for another 14 days. So there is some impact there, but from what we can see, it is not the major issue that's driving the jail population back up again. So there are things that we can continue. Cheryl talked about as part of diversion, increased crisis intervention training for law enforcement. As Mr. O'Malley pointed out, really focusing on getting the diversion program up and running. The extension of the pretrial diversion program to common pleas. I know that Judge Sheehan, Judge Russo.
Hi, Ms. Mitchell. My name is Brandy Carney, Environment
I'm gonna ask everyone,
I know everyone's transitioning.
can I ask folks who are on Zoom, please to mute?
People, including transportation, just call me now that.
You need to mute. Or Andy, you need to go ahead as host and mute everybody. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So that, and again, this bottom line is really focusing on that role of the jail expediter. And we think the third leg of this stool, in addition to jail and courts facility improvements, is looking at enhancing data collection so that there's earlier, better information on who's in jail and who might be eligible for release. So what that brought us to is the question of, should the steering committee consider reducing the base numbers for planning? Again, our base number is a rated capacity of 1,600 beds, which translates to an ADP of 1,350 versus, I think my last discussion with Rhonda, we were at 1,556. So what we looked at is, what does that mean? If we can attain 1,350, it means that we have reduced the jail population, excluding our current numbers historically, by as much as 40% to 45% of what it has been historically, just getting down to 1,350. The discussions of getting down to 1,000 would mean we'd be reducing our historic jail population in Cuyahoga by over 50%, which is a great goal if we could make it happen. But we have seen continually over the past several months that population creep up from its low of 900 and some to over 1,550 today.
And Andy, just on that note, 150 of those are ODRC prisoners. So I don't want the county to be tagged with those numbers.
Yeah, but again, Mr. O'Malley, I want to go back to this chart where that is not uncommon. Even pre-COVID, when we had higher numbers in the jail, we were at 246, 339, 384 awaiting transfer. You know, from what we can see, while there is some impact of quarantine, it is not the major factor that's driving that jail population back up.
I'm not disagreeing that the population has gone up. I'm just telling you that if we did not have the quarantine issue with ODRC, there'd be 150 less people in county jail this week. And that number has increased over the last 4 or 5 months, from starting out at 10, 20, 30 to the point where we were at 150 this week.
Right. Yeah, in fact, the last time we got numbers in September, the number of folks waiting transfer is the lowest it has been in this year. So yeah, all we're saying is, from what the data says, is while we recognize some people are staying longer, which is a concern because they're not getting to treatment or programs because they're being held at the county jail, it does not appear to be the major reason that's driving the population number, nor historically, even pre-COVID, that number would still exist in the population. It would not go to zero. Does that make sense?
Just keep in mind right now that even if that was, putting all that aside, right now with the number that are there right now, yeah, there's 117 there now. You can eliminate them all, and you would still be, you would still be over where you need to be. Right now, if we built the jail right now with the numbers we have right now, we'd be building the jail. Our target population would be 1,800 or 1,850. We have to get down to 1,600, which means 1,350, and we have to be consistently there. So that is the challenge now. But let me tell you why this is not that big a deal right now. It's not that big a deal because if we in fact can demonstrate that we can knock those numbers down in the next 6 months, we still can do exactly what we're doing. And we can say, okay, it's not a 1,600 person jail with 1,350, it's a 1,400. And the study you're going to see in a while says that the lower you get that number, the more significant the difference is. Because the lower you get that number, the more inefficient jail 1 and jail 2 are to operate. The more the problem it is because it's oversized, you can't change it. And the more efficient a new jail is. So the lower the number gets, as you'll see in a while, the more significant this recommendation becomes, the more powerful the recommendation becomes. And we'll get to that in a while. That's the study that we were asked to do. But go ahead, Andy.
And again, I'd also look to Cheryl to speak to this. I do not think you'll ever get the population awaiting transfer to zero simply because you don't transfer anybody the day that they're actually sentenced. Cheryl, you're muted.
That's correct. And it's also contingent upon ODCR having space available. Oftentimes, there's certain periods that they'll accept incoming offenders.
Yeah, I mean, actually right now the sentence, and part of that's also driven by the fact that sentencing has been delayed because jury trials have been delayed. Quite frankly, if the courts were up and operating, I think Mr. Malley is absolutely correct. That number would be much, much higher. But because of the impact of COVID on even the courts at that level, we're seeing less sentencing. But those people are in the pretrial population.
This is Kim Bates. I just have a brief question. I know you're talking about the old DRC and all of that, but does this model give the jail the ability to keep COVID prisoners away from the general population if they have this number right now?
Yeah, yes,
1,400 beds.
Yes, if we had a new facility, yes, and even in the existing facility, because the population's down, we can do more single selling. We do have provisions for single selling in the new program, and we also have a large expansion of medical and mental health beds for treatment.
Yeah, that jumps ahead, but I will tell you the program, and then I'm going to turn to Mr. Stanton. But I will make the comment that we, as part of the programming process, we have assumed that not only have we assumed that this pandemic does not magically go away, we have assumed that there's always the potential for this pandemic or another pandemic to occur. So from this point on, there will never be a jail facility that does not have a plan for the ability to quarantine. Mr. Stanton, I think you had a comment.
You can always have an additional factor relative to any number, but the issue about whether or not it's COVID related or ODRC is accepting prisoners, all I know is I've been here for over 40 years. I've handled thousands of cases. Fortunately, not 1,000 of my clients went to prison. A hell of a lot of them did. Why is it that they always left within 3 to 5 days? and you're gonna tell me that the numbers are never different beforehand? That makes no sense to me. I'm sorry. Historically, it makes no sense. 3 to 5 days, the individual was at Lorraine Correctional Institution. That's for decade after decade after decade. That is not occurring now. It hasn't occurred since COVID hit. People have been sitting in there for a month to 3 months. Secondly, I think an additional number that is important is that we also have anywhere from 60 to 80 people, sometimes a little higher, awaiting transport to local facilities who are not expecting them either. And although sometimes we had to wait 2 to 4 weeks to get somebody a bed in a private facility for counseling, it was 2 to 4 weeks. And that's completely unrelated here. So, and here, I'm sure there's somebody that knows more about numbers than I do, but I deal with this every day, and we have 200 to 250 people in that jail. And in my experience, and I've worked criminal cases every day since 1977, they didn't stay in jail. Okay, it's the same jail. So if somebody could please explain that dichotomy to me, or that disparity. I know you need to move on, but I don't think we need to move on or should move on until we get this number issue stabilized. That jail was built for 970 people. You know it, I know it. That has not been the situation for 4 decades since that jail was built. So please, somebody explain that to me, because I'm not willing to accept that we have, you know, that 250 person number is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant at all. Thank you.
Rhonda, were you able to hear that? I'm sorry. Rhonda, you're currently at 117. How many are you transporting out this week?
Well, we were transporting 50 plus this week to DRC. I don't know the exact number to treatment programs. I'd have to look at that. But we've made a great impact. As many that we transport, there's a close number that comes in. So we're trying to get ahead. It's a little more difficult when you have a COVID positive that pops up and soils a group who is ready to transport, which is exactly what has happened recently. There's been some medical staffing issues. They have sick staff as well. That's delayed some of the testing. And that's to be expected with COVID going on. The staff are not immune to becoming sick themselves. And so I can appreciate when Mr. Stanford, public defender and prosecutor are saying we're working to get that number down, but it's just not as easy to put people on a bus and send them. So,
but Rhonda, we're going to be below 100 this week, and that's going to be the first time I'm talking about waiting to transfer to ODRC in probably a month. And I think all the consultants were suggesting is that the number that we have waiting to transfer ODRC is, as a percentage and total number, lower than it ever has been right now, and certainly within the numbers historically, regardless of how frequently they were transported to Lorraine Correctional, like let's say 3 days, because they're putting up the real numbers in January, February, March of this year, and we talked about those numbers, you know, in our last meeting. And two, more importantly, they don't represent the vast majority of the increase when we went from 950 to now 1550. We got probation violations, you know, going up, right? Increased grand jury, operation for bail cases has continued. And so those are the other factors that have gone up. You know, nevertheless, I think we're going to be below 100 by next week. And we're going to have, I don't know, Rhonda, how many we're going to have ready for transport next week? If you have those numbers available. Yeah. I think we're on the right trajectory. Last week is Rhonda's going to be reaching out to ODRC this week to get to you know, demand, ask push to get them from the 14 days to the 7 days from quarantine. You know, speeding up that process even further.
Rhonda, I think you had one more comment.
Just to say, I don't have the numbers for transport next week. I have started conversation with DRC about trying to reduce the number of the waiting period, like Chief Gordon said, from 14 days to 7 days. I haven't been successful in that yet. I have one more person to speak to in an attempt to make it possible. DRC has given some other suggestions, such as they can cohort with other people. It doesn't necessarily just have to be DRC transports. The challenges around that is you're mixing different people and mistakes get made, people in and out, and then you steal the whole group again. So that's something we have to strategize here. Unfortunately, we've had some other priorities this week.
Thank you. Mr. Stanton, did you have one more? We do have to move on, and I have a final comment, but I think, Mark, did you have one more comment you wanted to make?
I do. This works.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how the discussion became a criticism of what's going on in the jail. It's not a criticism at all. I understand what confronts the jail and that we can't get people out and we're at the mercy of ODRC. I'm only talking about the nature of the numbers. These numbers are irregular and unprecedented because of the situation that confronts us. I'm only saying that the number of people that are in jail, if this were normal circumstances and environment, would immediately be lower. That's all.
And
it's not a criticism that we're not
right,
getting
and
them
Mark,
out of jail.
and Mr.
That's not our fault.
Right. I want to make one comment though. Mr. Stanton, one comment I want to make, and I want to clarify something I said. When I used, hold on just one second. When I talked about the relevancy of it, my only point is, assuming you're absolutely right, and everyone wants to drive the number down, the lower that number goes, the more compelling the argument about what we do with the jail. So my only point is not that it's not relevant, it's very relevant, but as the number goes down, the argument becomes more compelling, and you'll see that. So let's go on, Andy, because we are getting a little bit behind.
Okay.
What we need to do
Jeff, can I just add one thing?
Yes.
Darmond, you know, I'm listening to this, and I really am very appreciative of both Prosecutor O'Malley and Mr. Stanton position. They've been working very hard and very committed to reduce the jail population as much as possible. That's very significant. We've had conversations with Prosecutor O'Malley about the difficulty in moving prisoners out to the that we're having with ODRC. We're trying to correct that, and I believe the law is very clear that Mr. O'Malley's point is well taken, and that needs to be pushed in any way we have to. So just to let you know where we are on that.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Budish. Okay, so let's, Andy, we do have to pick up the pace a little bit because I know the content we have to keep going through.
And some of this we did do in the earlier October meeting, so I'll go through it quickly. Please stop me if you have questions. Before we get to the major issues of determination, as a sidebar issue, we were asked to take a look at, well, with the population down, could we reuse the existing jails? What if we reuse jail 2 and build a new remote facility? What would that mean? And if the population goes down, would it make sense to reuse the jails? As we go through this, there's a lot of backup slides in your packet that will be posted to the web after the meeting that we will not be going in, but if you want me to go refer to any of those, please ask. So the first thing was a continued use of jail 1 and 2. And for both of these, we looked at 4 key issues: physical condition, renovation costs, functional shortfalls, operational impact, and implementation. I did leave two of the backup slides in because I think they're important in understanding this, and you've seen this before. The first thing is that the jail 1 was built at a time when we built very, very small housing units, and actually relied for this jail at that time what was considered to be intermittent supervision. In other words, we did not staff every housing unit. Today we went to direct supervision. What that means is this jail was planned with 24 cell housing units, 24 beds. Standards allow us to be up to 48 beds. So effectively it means we are doubling our housing staffing. Excuse me, I had to admit somebody. We're doubling our housing staffing. So effectively the housing staffing for jail 1 is very high. Secondly, today we really provide services out at housing. Basically, every program and service in jail 1 requires escorted movement to recreation only on floor 7 and 9. That also, something we'll just touch on later, creates a COVID issue because now I have to move people for programs and services, which means if I'm quarantining them, they're either not getting program and services or I'm moving them through the jail. Same with visiting. And we heard throughout this process about concerns for defense counsel, public defender, access, private providers, community-based, faith-based organizations, access for programs. That's affected by when staffing's down, we have to staff housing for security, which gives us limited staff for movement. And then we also have to have escorted movement to medical. Again, all medical centralized, whereas in a modern facility, as we programmed it, we would do our medical screening at housing. And this just gives you an idea of what we do in a modern housing unit. Every housing unit has its own recreation area, has its own medical exam room, has program rooms, has video visiting rooms, so that effectively for 48 beds or 60 beds in a minimum security unit, that one staff person is able to not only supervise housing and interact with the population, but able to deliver programs. This is important because that is the major, that along with one other issue related to control rooms, is the major drivers for our simple evaluation of operational savings. Did I lose the slide? I may have, excuse me, I need to. I hid one slide, I didn't mean to. So this is the summary on what does reuse mean. First of all, without any functional programs, we'd be spending $305 million just to upgrade the physical plant. We would not generate operational savings equivalent of $14 to $15 million per year, only looking at housing staff and control rooms. The current population exceeds the operational capacity of jail 1 and jail 2. So relative to something Mr. O'Malley asked in the last meeting, if we were to do that, we'd have to get the population much, much lower than it is today. If the population would grow, there are no options for expanding. We would be faced with either reopening Bedford, Euclid, or out-of-county placement, or a third facility. The historic cost of Bedford, Euclid, and out-of-county placement at the time they were being used was over $12 million a year. We have continued movement. No matter what we do in both of those jails, everybody's going to continue to move to all programs and services, which is a safety and security, staffing, and health concern. But more importantly, as has been mentioned, it's basically denying people access to treatment and programs, especially and in many times access to counsel. Significant compromises in programs. And the bottom line is we believe that even after significant expenditures, they are not going to meet contemporary and evidence-based practices as we've been looking at programming the new facility. So we do not believe that either in terms of return on investment for the construction costs, as well as the huge impact on operational costs, it makes sense to continue to use jail 1 and jail 2. Jeff, any questions on that? Should we pause for a moment?
I think we can keep going. I think we need to keep going. We've been through this many times.
All right. We were also asked to look at what if we kept jail 2 as a pretrial facility and built something new somewhere else, recognizing that jail 1 is it has the major shortfalls. First of all, typically the population for jails across the country and specifically for Cuyahoga County is about a 70-30 split between the pretrial population and the sentence population. And quite frankly, driving the population down, especially looking at misdemeanor sentencing, is a key way to get the total numbers down for the jail. And the city has been doing that. So the current rated capacity of jail 2 is only 472 beds. That means when we look at that 70% split, we're short 648 beds. So whether or not we used it as a pretrial facility or not, we would still be transporting because the largest portion of our pretrial population could not be held on site. So again, looking at the big picture summary, the first big issue is jail 2 is not large enough to accommodate the pretrial population. Jail 2 has very little program and support area. It has a multi-purpose room on each floor, visiting on the mezzanine, and a recreation deck, but has no medical services, has no support services. Also, importantly, central booking and medical mental health should really travel with the pretrial population. Why? Because as people come in the front door, pretrial status, I'm going to make diversion decisions. I'm going to make a decision if they need to immediately go to medical or mental health, acute mental health housing. So there's really a strong operational relationship, which means we would either have to rebuild that adjacent to jail 2 or build it on the site of jail 1 in order to have a fully operating system if we want a pretrial to be downtown. Again, significant costs of doing the split facility, and there'd be a huge impact on operational costs because of duplication of services and programming, i.e. i.e. food, medical, program services, visiting would have to be duplicated in 2 facilities if it was a remote facility, and would have increased transportation costs. We believe that ultimately doing a split facility, and we believe it's been proven by many other jurisdictions, it's going to actually increase current operating costs and would actually exceed any savings realized by replacing jail 1. So we do not believe that that using jail 2 for pretrial housing only really makes a whole lot of sense, especially where the numbers are. We were then asked to look at what about reuse if we got the population down to 1,000? And what you see here is this was our original program at 1,796 beds. If we take it down to 1,192, what would it be? And then how would we do that with the existing jail? And we did this just as based on the information we had available. First of all, if we compared, I'm going to go back to the slide, excuse me. If we compared this, which is a standalone new jail with 1,000 beds, versus jail 2 plus new construction on either the jail 1 site or the adjacent site, we are looking at a delta of about $60 million in construction costs. And I think, Jeff, this goes back to what you said in the introduction, that if we could get the population down to 1,000, we'd actually still save more money building as a new facility than we would trying to do renovation and construction adjacent to the existing jail. Obviously, the new jail allows us to fully meet program, allows us to get out of movement to programs and services. It just gives us a much better ultimate answer in terms of best practices and operations. Here's the real key. I'm going to start here. At the capacity we have now, we would be looking at staffing 41 housing units. Excuse me, total adult female, excuse me, yeah. In a reduced size, we're at 32. If we do a split facility, if we do it downtown, we're at 38. So effectively, it would take 30.6 more FTEs just for housing. So what does that mean in terms of the overall? Again, $60 million less in construction and $10 million greater annual operating savings. So effectively, in looking at the analysis, if we can drive that population down, as Mr. O'Malley and Mr. Stanton have advocated for, it would still make more sense to do that in the new facility than to try to do it in our existing facility, jail 2, with expansion.
If you had, so once again, just to, and there's a lot of backup on this, but aside from the fact that you have, obviously the smaller you can make the new jail, the less the construction costs, but relatively you can save more construction costs than on the renovation because you still have the same base buildings that you have to deal with. But more importantly, while there could be some operational savings, if you drive the numbers down in the old facility, because of transportation and other issues, there's a limitation to how much you can get in savings. The lower the population goes, proportionally, the greater the savings that you can get operationally in the new building. So the smaller the building, comparatively, the greater the increase in the differential in savings building new versus trying to renovate.
All right. So now we're going to jump into the comparative evaluation of the options. Jeff, let me know when you'd like to take a break, if so.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we well, do people here want a 5-minute break? Yeah, we'll take just 5 minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we allowed for that. Because we're
going to start in 5 minutes. We're also going to make a modification here on our sound system on the break that we think can improve this a little bit. So 5 minutes, we're going to start back up at 27 after. Okay, thank you, everyone. So Jeff, if you could see if we can improve that sound. I think we had a method we've thought about using.
Did you hear it? Yeah, it's crazy. All right, let's go this route. This, what's your port on this side? I have HDMI and I also have
Hey, let's just try it. All right, now let's see what's going on. I know what that is, yeah. I had a newer computer than this, but I like this one.
Okay.
So,
all right. So let's see if we can, if you're connected. Is there anybody else online?
Let's try this. Andy, can you hear me? Andy, you're on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Jeff.
Yeah, but we can't hear Andy now.
Actually, I'm just miming.
Jeff, I don't know if you can hear me or not. This is Kim Bates, but I keep getting kicked off.
I just readmitted you, Miss Bates. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why that's happening. It could be a tech. While we've learned a lot about technology in 6 months, it still doesn't always work.
No, you can't take control, right?
Right. Thank you.
Well, if I do, he has the PowerPoint. That's the problem. I think we should go back to where we were. All right. Undo your steps. Okay. Take this back. You're right. I don't know what that is. Yeah.
I don't think it's yours.
No, Andy's on. We have a few people who are not on mute. Andy, can you hear me right now?
Yes, I can, Jeff.
Okay. All right.
See if you can just mute everybody.
Andy, do me a favor, just for a second, mute everybody. Can you hit the mute button for everybody?
Yes.
We're just trying to test something to see if there's an issue.
We're getting a little crack.
We're getting crackle.
So it's somebody's, is it, wait a second. Is it?
You're not, you haven't muted everybody.
Some are on phone and they're not muting for some reason, Jeff.
Oh, he can't mute the ones on phone.
Right.
That's where the crackles, it's coming from somebody's
That's what's
phone.
it, yeah. So are you connected here?
Jeff, you need to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, we're okay. We were having crackle coming through someone's phone. They've muted it and now we're fine. So good.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll remind everybody to stay on mute if they're, I think we're good now.
yeah. I did mute all to check that, Jeff, but I gave everybody the ability to unmute themselves if they want to ask questions.
That's great. Okay, we're going to start back in 1 minute. 2 minutes. I'm sorry, 2 minutes. I said 27.
But it only, huh? It's only good for the computer. Right. Okay.
Okay, I think we're about ready to continue. So Andy, well, let's see. Hold on, Mr. Stanton's not back yet. Let's give him another couple minutes here, another minute.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly so that we have at least an hour to go over the determination.
Yeah, you need to, and we've been through this before in some detail, so we'll have to move fast. Why don't you get started, Andy?
So we're going to take a look at the development of the alternatives for comparison. As Jeff pointed out, the one alternative is based on a new jail on a new site. The other alternative looked at what if we did everything adjacent to the existing Justice Center as a comparison. So key objectives, I think we're all very clear on. Perhaps the biggest issue is service delivery at the housing unit. And one of the things I know Mr. Stanton has been very concerned about is access to, especially if we would look at a site not in the downtown core.
Hey, Andy,
yes.
I want you to return to this slide. I want Mr. Stanton to see this. He's not in the room, so I want you to. We're going to return to this when he gets here, because this is his biggest issue. So why don't you skip over that, and we're going to come back to that issue.
This slide comes up again, Jeff. So I'll touch on it further. So. Again, the key issue was we're looking at about 1,664 beds. What you see on this slide is the notion of doing this in management clusters. rather than simply building a large facility, thinking about smaller clusters for service delivery, for management control, and for the population. A graphic which shows what that is, and I think this is part of Ms. Bates' question earlier. You know, we have a variety of different housing units, 24 cells, double cells, 32 cells, single cells, 48 cells, single celled, 60-bed dormitories, and then a wide range of medical and mental health housing. And a critical issue is for medical and mental health, as opposed to when you go into most modern jails, such as Jail 2, you see two-tier housing, you know, with an open mezzanine. All medical and mental health housing is planned as single-level housing. So there's a great variety of housing in terms of how we can segregate the population. Looking at a total of about 768,000 square feet, plus 33,000 square foot of recreation. Why is that so high? Because every housing unit has a recreation area attached to it. Again, one of the big issues for economy and operational savings and improved service delivery for the population that has to be in secure confinement is everything's at that housing unit, where the one officer at a ratio of 1 to 32, 48, or 60 is responsible for all programs and services. Is Mr. Stanton returned yet?
Andy, what was the ratio you just said?
I said it varies in our program from 1 to 32 to 1 to 48 to 1 to 60.
Okay.
And that's based upon different classifications of the population we're dealing with.
Right.
But we are never at the 1 to 24.
Never at the 1 to 22 to 24, which is jail 1.
1, correct. Is Mr. Stanton back?
Not yet.
Jeff? All right.
I'll keep watch. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll just touch on this.
Touch on it, and then we'll come back to it if we need to. We did go through this with him privately.
Yeah, we did have a workshop with the jail to talk about response to pandemic. Critical issues is a variety of housing units to allow for separation, a significant increase in medical beds, which would allow us to do greater quarantine. The key issue is service delivery at the housing unit so that the population can still have access to program and services without moving through the jail. Food would come to the housing unit, video visiting would be at the housing unit, video appearance, program rooms, medical triage, you know, their basic medical care would occur right at housing, free access to outdoor recreation, and provisions for kiosks in the jail for commissary ordering and scheduling visits and other things. Enlarged intake central booking. For those of you that have been in the jail and are familiar with the existing intake, it's very, very crowded. There's the ability to do social distancing is extremely limited, especially if we have to use secure confinement for anybody at booking. So that's a major issue. Improved ventilation. And the pictures which are here because Mr. Stanton talked about this issue was every housing unit will have a private area for video visiting. So effectively, defense counsel, public defender can visit with their client at the housing unit without worrying about him being moved somewhere else to a video visiting room, et cetera. This would also allow expansion of visiting hours. And one thing we have added to the program, which will impact the courthouse, is providing a video area in the courthouse so that defense attorneys, when they're at the courts, if we're at a remote site for the jail, would have access to their clients, or access if they're having a discussion with the judge about release or conditions or sentencing.
And when he comes back, I do want Mr. Stanton to talk about this because he did indicate that one change which has happened in the defense community is their growing comfort level with doing these video conferences and relying on this. And he feels that is going to continue. And as long as the proper facilities are there to do it, he's encouraged by that. And that's the reason why I think he's more supportive now of the ability to have put a jail that is not attached to a courthouse.
So again, looking very, very quickly at the options were, and basically one of the, all of these options are based upon doing a campus remote site, as we talked about earlier today. 3B and determination 2 would be removed, correct, Jeff?
Yes.
So moving forward, so our general
just go back to the last slide. I just want to point out that in January, we talked about these options and what would be authorized for further study. And, you know, the only option that all 12 people agreed should be part of further study is the standalone downtown courthouse and a standalone jail. That was the 12-0. We agreed to do these other two for further study, and we'll still talk about those. But the only one that really everyone unanimously thought we should have for further study was 3C. And then the other one that we still believe is appropriate for further study is 2A. So those are the two that we are recommending, and I've explained, and we'll talk through again why we you know, 3B, we know there's never going to be enough support for 3B because there's not enough support to go outside of the downtown Cleveland court to a courthouse. Everyone wants, the majority have always stated, and there's that the courthouse has to stay downtown. And that's a pretty strong view among a lot of people. Go ahead.
Yeah. And in fact, Jeff, am I not correct? While we agreed to study 3B based on the rules, it would not have passed at 8-4?
It would not pass at 9-3. These have to be 10-2. But once again, this was just people saying we want to continue the study.
Right.
This was not the ultimate approval anyway. Let's go ahead.
All right. So if you recall, we talked about this whole mix of different housing types. But one of the things we thought was important, that even though they're different, whether they're 32 singles, 24 doubles, or 48 singles, that it has the same kind of form so that staff has the flexibility to work in any housing unit and know where things are, just as a level of comfort. I think the other thing we talked about is this, that we did not go through, but we did discuss in our jail workshop, which is in your handout, was the quality of environment for staff so that the environment is supportable of direct supervision, of interactive management and behavior management, co-locating reception short-term near intake, and hold on, I gotta let somebody else in. Excuse me. And allow for incremental growth as well as phased expansion, and that was really a key. And again, whatever we showed today is simply done to do an illustration of what planning for the jail could be. So this is what basically the basic idea of a cluster. Most of our clusters are based upon 6 housing units with a management core. So this would be a typical 24-cell, 48-bed housing unit. And as you'll see in a moment, it could have variations. Cells on the outside, we talked about cells having actual windows in view and access to natural light. A common day room, the officer inside the housing unit. And this is really a big difference between jail 1, jail 2, and where we're going. Jail 1, as I said, was developed at a time when we focused on what was called intermittent surveillance. An officer periodically checked the housing unit. Jail 2 was based on what at that time, which was called remote observation. In other words, we put an officer in a glass box that could see into multiple housing units. Today, the most effective approach to operations is direct supervision. It's staff inside a housing unit directly involved in behavior, which has been proven to reduce inmate on staff violence, inmate on inmate violence, and to really create a much better environment for operations. Every housing unit would have an outdoor exercise area. And for our site test, we decided to assume that we had a single story, which will allow us then that every outdoor exercise area would actually be open to the sky and people would be able to feel the sun on their bodies. For those of you that have not been in the jail, the recreation areas in jail 1 and jail 2 are basically gymnasiums with louvers. The sun never really hits the deck of the recreation area.
Hey, Andy, I want you to go back for just 1 second to one slide. Go back to slide 62. Mr. Stanton.
I'll do that in 1 second.
You're okay with it? Okay, this is about the video visiting. Okay, Mr. Stanton says it's fine. He's been through it. We don't need to repeat again. So keep going.
Okay, and then obviously cluster support, so that this is really a management unit. And then that's adapted, as you see in this diagram, that it could be the same configuration in single cells of 48 single cells. It could be the same configuration in 32 single cells, the same configuration in double cells, so that staff working in any one of these units, it feels comfortable and the same, and services are delivered. The other thought is to allow for either incremental expansion or for reduction in the size of a cluster, which is one of the advantages, we believe, of a new jail on a campus style or open site.
One of the principal issues, and we've talked about it time and again, and I'll state it one more time. Anything you do with jail 1 or jail 2, or for that matter, a vertical downtown jail, does not have flexibility because you cannot add or take out housing units, which are your principal cost. The concept here is you have your core facility. It can satisfy 1,600. It could be less if we start with less. It can go to more, 24, and you can add and subtract these housing pods and therefore adjust. And that is critical. The other thing I want to point out about this is when you saw some of those jail costs, that was a 2/2. That implied probably a 15-acre site, but it had 2-story, 2/2 in these units. Frankly, if you went to a single level, what happens is you save a lot of construction cost. You actually enhance the recreation area. The amount that you save in construction cost is much greater than the amount you expend. If you go to the right area, going to 15 to 30 acres, the additional 15 acres is not comparatively expensive versus the construction cost. So the number you actually saw for construction cost actually will go down probably around 10% if you can get it, if you do the larger campus area, and you do not increase your operational cost. You actually may enhance the environment with the recreation area. So that's the point I wanted to make. We're not there yet, but that's just a point I wanted to make.
Okay, and then you see a central core here: public lobby, staff support, administration, staff parking, public and attorney parking. You know, that's all part of the notion when we talk about site criteria, is assuring we have a site that will accommodate all the support. And then our upper level, we simply were showing medical mental health because it's single level housing, and we want to be able to, again, each of these areas have their own outdoor rec area, which we do not have for medical mental health now in jail 1. So they could also be open to the sky. The yellow shows that while we are going to have video visiting at the housing unit, which I'll jump back to that in a moment, Jeff, since I mentioned it, the yellow also allows for access to the housing units for in-person visiting if and when needed, so that we have the ability to do very similar to what we do in jail 1 now, where you go up an elevator to a visiting room. Even in a horizontal scheme, we would have that ability. And Jeff, I'll just jump back to that slide you asked me about so that we can mention it. And then
you don't need, don't, because for 2 reasons. Number 1, Mr. Stanton says he doesn't need it. Number 2, Mr. Stanton just had to leave to make a phone call, so we understand. Go ahead.
All right. So we'll go ahead. So again, this shows how with expansion, first of all, we have some incremental expansion, or we have the ability to reduce the number of housing units, as well as that planned expansion to get to the 2,400 beds plus or minus. And again, the support core at this point is programmed to support up to a rated capacity of 2,400 beds. There's some slides in your handout, which will be on the web, which illustrate some other jurisdictions, which we had presented to you, I believe, through a couple meetings, that the issue of inmate transport is something that jurisdictions have dealt with in making very similar decisions. Which I think you have a slide on Philadelphia, Maricopa County, Arizona, and a slide on Lexington, Kentucky. We did go through an analysis of what it would mean to do court transport. And again, this is also supported by both video appearance and video visiting for defense counsel and others. A key issue is the intent is that the jail itself will be responsible directly for transport. So we went through what is the staffing requirements, what is the bus costs. So it looks like it's a cost of about $812,000 per year, which does assume that a sunk cost for vehicle replacement over time. So we believe that that was a fair price based on what we've seen elsewhere. The comparative option was to look at what would happen if we decided to just expand downtown. And this was tied to overall option 1B, which would have been renovation and expansion of the courthouse, as you see, where Jail 1 used to be, the potential use of Jail 2, and construction. One of the issues we've had to deal with is the site at the lower end of which was once considered as no longer available. So we're basically left with one site, which would be adjacent to Jail 2 into the courts complex to consider for expansion. We looked at two options early. One would be to do a vertical facility, which would be a 14-story building, or to develop the entire site. The critical issue for the jail administration is avoiding, where possible, high-rise construction, simply in terms of emergency exiting, emergency services, and quite frankly, the more floors you have, the more expensive it is to operate in terms of having adequate rovers available for moving people and for emergency situations. So we based it on the full site because of reduced operational costs, fewer clusters, better adjacencies for medical and mental health rather than stacking medical and mental health. Couple things to think about is, though, if we were really going to plan for expansion, we would have to plan for vertical expansion via shell space or consider future site acquisition. And any site in proximity to the lake is going to require deep foundations as well as a connecting tunnel or bridge between the new site, Jail 2, and the courts complex. I'm having a, there we go. So again, the general approach was very much the same, but first we looked at how we would reuse the existing jail, and we assumed we would use the existing jail for most of our larger populations. It could be double celled, either minimum or medium security. That does assume that we get from ODRC permission to actually rate it at double cell capacity. Then we again looked at a standard kind of housing footprint for 48 cells versus 48 bed single cells. It could be subdivided to be 24 cell double celled units so that we could stack that, as you see here, on the adjacent site. So basically you would end up with a 8-story building plus mezzanines. So it's actually effectively floors 4 through 8 or double height floors with 4 to 8 housing units per floor. This gives you an idea of what that would be in blocking and stacking. The existing jail reused for minimum medium, food service expanded in place, laundry expanded in place. All of the other services, most of which are in Jail 1 now, would be included in the new building. Medical and mental health housing, visitation, public lobby, intake, and then our housing. And one of the things we'd have to evaluate going forward on this is whether or not we include in the original construction shell space to get to 2,400. Hopefully we're actually going to say, no, we're going to stay at 1,600. We would never need to expand the jail if we're able to really have effective population management.
So a point to be made here, and once again, what this demonstrates is we're not just assuming there's an issue with renovating Jail 1 and Jail 2. We designed the renovation of Jail 1 and Jail 2 and looked at it extensively to see what it would cost and how it would work. But even this design and all the costs you're going to see do not assume expansion beyond 1,600. So if we were ever, if our population grew, or if we were ever not capable of keeping that number down, there's additional costs and expense and construction to even what we're already showing you. Go ahead.
All right. So we'll take a quick look at the review and comparative evaluation. Again, it's 10 10 to 11 there.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get us
Gotta
to the
move.
determination. Yes, sir. So again, obviously, the new jail is going to be much, much more responsive to all the criteria we established in terms of program, future expansion, operational efficiencies. And in fact, 1B has reduced operational efficiencies, has reduced flexibility for design, because basically all we were doing with these diagrams is illustrating what could be, not what will be. Quality of environment would be much better in the new facility. We would have court transport if we did a new facility on a remote site. So that was rated as partially non-responsive. Locational considerations will really be resolved through siting. And we also believe that with a new site, we can minimize the developmental impacts of a new facility. Site availability, impediments to development, construction logistics, as well as urban design and the impacts on community. Cost estimating, just very briefly, we actually used 3 independent estimators. Looked at different, you had them look at each of look at the program, the ideas. This is primarily program generated on a component basis. Some picked up some different costs than others, so we reconciled those to come up with what we thought was the best budgetary estimate. So a new jail on a new site has a construction cost of about $404 million. That's 100% new construction. Going to the opposite column, our new construction cost is reduced in base because obviously we're reusing jail 2, but it also has a penalty for deep pile foundations. We assume if we buy a new site, we can go with normal spread footings. It has a penalty for the bridge connector. So it brings new construction cost to about $282 million. Renovation, however, is another $140 million. And we have to assume that we cannot renovate jail 2 until we build the new jail. Effectively, to reduce time to occupancy, we suggest we would build the new jail. We continue to use jail 1 while we renovate jail 2, and then we would demolish jail 1. To each of these, we have to add project costs, fees and administration. Site acquisition right now is to be determined on both. And we assumed, so this comparison assumes equivalent site costs, though we believe the downtown site with relocation, with viable properties, would in fact be more expensive than a new site. But we do not have numbers to put into the equation. So in any event, we're looking at a total probable cost of about $499.6 million for a new jail versus $554.8 for an existing, for
Andy, hold on a minute. Because we're seeing your computer on yours, the pictures of individuals are covering part of the slide. So can you move that off on yours? You know what I'm saying? Can you, Andy, did you hear what I just said? Andy?
Yes.
Yeah, listen, on your slide, you're covering part of the picture with the pictures of people. If you can move the view of individuals off the slide.
I am. Did that do it?
Not, well, I don't know how they, well, hold on, because it's not that way on, let me see some.
Is that way on the screen, Jeff?
No, it's not my view. Hold on just one second. We just have a little issue here. While we're fixing this issue, my view's fine.
I think each individual needs to minimize it on their screens.
Oh, you know what? It's not a problem for anybody else. You got the books here. Just while we're, one point I will make, and this just goes back to my other point, because I'm a little concerned about the use of this cost information, that once again, that 404 and 499 on the left-hand side, that's a 2/2. That is that's the estimate for 2/2 jail, not the more linear jail, which would be less expensive. Go ahead, Andy. We're okay.
So again, you're looking at a probable cost delta in project cost, exclusive of site costs, of about $55 million. And if we had to include shell space for the future, that would go to about 125 million. The alternative being we'd have to purchase additional site in the future. So what we're emphasizing is that there is no penalty on a new jail on a new site for planning for future expansion.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, or should I? Do you want me to go back?
Keep going. In fact, go ahead faster.
Should I do the FedEx routine? Take one deep breath.
Yeah, just keep going.
All right. As you recall, we went through all this before when we did the basic analysis. We're going from 66 housing pods in the existing facility to 41 in the new. That's 127.5 correctional officers. Jail 2 has housing control rooms on each floor because of the way it was set up. And Jail 1 has a couple also, which is an additional 68 correctional FTEs. This does not mean people are going to lose their jobs immediately. Some of these positions aren't filled now because the jail cannot get to full staffing. And part of it then would also be done over time. We did not estimate what the cost right now is of movement, but we have the additional cost of court of $812,000. So that was taken into account in this analysis. Obviously, those savings reduced significantly with the reuse of Jail 2 and a new annex because of housing unit sizes, number of floors, and the fact that we will have increased movement and we will have duplication in the two facilities.
And by the way, the fact that we haven't put a number there for movement is a huge number. We know there's a big number associated with movement that we won't need in a new facility. Right. That's a big number that you add to this. Yes. Yeah, the movement from the recreation area, where we don't have that movement in the new jail, for example. Go ahead.
Actually, Jeff, I just wanted to be clear on that. We will have recreation areas with all the new housing as part of building. If we built downtown, we would still have movement to recreation in Jail 2, but more importantly, we'd have movement between the two buildings.
That's what I'm talking about. Go ahead.
Yes, yes. So what does that mean? Again, we talked about the difference in construction, but the difference in operations is over $9 million that is generated, and that does take into account the fact that we have to do annual court transportation costs, which slightly reduced our savings. Now, the other big issue is a new jail we can probably occupy in 3 years. With phased construction on the downtown site, we're probably looking at 6 years, 3 years for new and then 3 years for renovation. So that there is also a difference in time to occupancy and realizing savings.
Yeah. By the way, if we're using 3 years, we're on the critical path. So not getting an okay today already pushes that back. I got to be clear. 3 years is very aggressive.
Yeah. Let's make that clear that that's from the start date.
From the start date, yeah. I don't know if 3 years is possible. Yeah. Go ahead.
And again, if we go back to where we were when we started this study, if we take the savings for the two, and we also throw in what we were spending at that time for Euclid, Bedford, and outplacement, which may or may not be available for debt service. It may have already been reallocated. You're looking at a delta of still $9 million, and effectively, as I recall from the analysis we did, Jeff, this just about gets us to covering the cost of debt service exclusive of the site costs.
That's right. Go ahead.
So with that, Jeff, I'm going to go turn to the site criteria issue. And do you want to take the lead on that?
Well, go ahead. Was there a question? Judge Russo has a question or a comment. Go back a slide, Andy.
Just a thought that's out there is if, for whatever reason, the diversion center doesn't move forward, for whatever reason, it doesn't get funding or it doesn't move forward, is there a possibility that this vote for the determination to move forward? I know we said ideally it's not ideal to put a diversion center in a jail, but it's been done. And so the question is if if the diversion center doesn't happen, for whatever reasons down the road, is there a possibility of adding a diversion center to this proposal so that there is something for the mental health, that they're not going to the jail, but they're going to a diversion center in this proposal? Could it be something that could be added on?
Actually, Jeff, I was able to hear that question. Judge Russo, we're currently doing a project for Yavapai County in Arizona, which includes a new jail and a new site. And as part of the site, we have planned a separate diversion center, a separate outbuilding, so to speak, because they do want diversion to be separate from going to jail, so that it's clearly not a punitive arrest occasion, but they wanted it to be co-located actually for convenience for law enforcement. So I do think that would be a possibility if we got the right site.
Yeah, I'm just going to say this before we go, based upon Jeff's statement, I just want everybody to clear where I'm at. I'm not even supporting a new jail until we have a diversion center operating. So the whole concept of doing this jail before the diversion center will never fly in my book. This community needs a diversion center now. We need no more tragedies in the jail. We need no more stacking people who are mentally ill in county jail. And I will not support a new county jail. So there's a diversion center up and operating.
Okay.
And I'm going to make a motion during this meeting that we go in that route, that there needs to be an operating diversion center prior to any new county jail.
Hold on a minute. First of all, did everyone hear that? I want to repeat what Mr. O'Malley said, then I'm going to turn to Mr. Gallagher. So what Mr. O'Malley said is that in his view, the importance of having a diversion center up and running now, in his view, it's so critical that he is not going to support a new jail unless or until he sees evidence of a diversion center up and running. Is that a fair statement, Mr. O'Malley?
Yes, and I hate to be that way, but the fact that we're even tossing around the idea of building this before a diversion center is operating is just a non-starter to me. We need to divert the mentally ill out of the criminal justice system, and it needs to happen now.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Gallagher. The one thing I do want to point out is even if you agree to go to the next step, you can always stop it after the next step. We can design it, we can get moving, and 6 months from now, if you don't see a diversion center up and running, you can still preclude the jail from going forward if you wanted to. But my point is that if we don't keep this process going right now, we're going to lose valuable months. So if 6 months from now a diversion center is up and running, then we're going to have another 6 months right now in the process. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gallagher.
I appreciate what you're saying, Jeff, but I'm just saying I don't see the sense of urgency in the diversion center issue that I'm seeing with the let's construct a new jail issue.
Okay.
And I think it's a disservice to the community. And I have sat back and watched what I think are strategic errors in the past made by this county. For instance, building an administration building and then selling the parking garage it's attached to, selling the property around the Justice Center several years ago when in fact we may need it now. So just the lack of foresight. And to me, in this situation,
hey Mike, hold on a minute. Mike, can you get closer to your microphone or speak louder?
Yeah.
And just do that again. I don't want to have to repeat it. Go ahead.
Yeah. And my issue is that it appears we're putting the cart in front of the horse. Can you hear me now, Jeff? Better? Maybe. Bottom line is we need, in my opinion, I've seen things that this county has done in the last decade that has made me question many things, like selling the parking garage at the administration building, selling the property around the Justice Center, which we may now need. But to me, the correct way to go about this is to put the horse in front of the cart, which is a diversion center, before we build the county, which is what I think.
I know, Mike. Yeah, we're having difficulty here with the mic, with the sound system here, but we can't hear. So let me. I could hear through my computer here. So what Mike is saying, and I apologize if I don't get this exactly right, he has talked about past issues with the county in planning around the administration building and other issues where the thought is that the full and careful planning was not done, and he's very concerned that we're moving forward with the jail. He doesn't see the immediacy of having to move forward with the jail. He does see the immediacy on the diversion center. And I think the conclusion is, from your perspective, that doing the jail before we finish the diversion center and have that clearly in place, in your view, is putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, but Jeff, I'm not saying we don't continue on the path of.
Hey, but Mike, I really have to tell you, even on my computer, we're not hearing you clearly. Can you either get closer to your microphone or speak a lot louder? It's really difficult.
Yeah, I think it's this whole computer. Hold on a second, Jeff.
Yeah, please.
Jeff, can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay. Again, I'm not saying do not proceed forward on looking at the county jail. But what I'm saying is, in the past, I have seen acts where the county has put the cart in front of the horse. And I think in this situation, a diversion center is critical. I believe in Maricopa, we built a diversion center. We understood the numbers that were reduced in the jail, and then they built a county jail. We are not doing it, to me, in a logical manner, which is increase our diversions, get an understanding of our numbers, and then build the jail. And so I'm saying keep going forward on the jail, but we need an active and operating diversion center before we build a jail.
Fair enough. Understood. Well, okay. Let's go ahead. Mike, go ahead, Mike.
And I think we all understand what the prosecutor's saying as it is a position that's taken by the public defender. Understand something, and I want all the individuals on this committee to understand something here. Mike, you did say you don't understand the necessity, and the importance of moving forward or something to that effect. I'll tell you what, since we've stopped $20.8 million down the drain, $20.8 million that we have screwed down the drain by not acting. Acting on the jail is not important, it's necessary. If this jail is blocked today, I'm telling you right now, the appetite of the council ultimately will decide whether or not we're going to move forward in paying for this is at an end. We can't lose money by indecision. I agree with you. We have to move in a logical manner to get to where you want to get to, where we want to get to. That, to me, is a side issue to this jail and moving forward. I agree that it probably shouldn't be in the jail, but the reality is, and we got the budget from the administration last week or this week, 20.8 million using the calculus that our experts have given us have gone down the drain by sitting on our hands, reviewing information that we have been sitting on for 7 years. 7 years. And we are moving forward. Unacceptable. We are going to move forward with this committee or without this committee on a jail. The decision will be made today, one way or the other. On a diversion center, I'm 100% with you. But as far as the jail goes and moving on to jail, if this committee wants to move forward in a logical manner, and this is out to the public, $20.8 million, looking at the budget that I looked at, completely unacceptable. So we have to make a decision on the jail today, ancillary discussions on the side. This is a jail discussion as far as I'm concerned. I'm as frustrated as I could be. I sat here for a year plus knowing that we had to move on a jail. We had another death, we all know that. The jail is antiquated. The reuse, the numbers I just saw are absolutely devastating. And the silence that I hear from those that wanted to look at that tells me that at least they now understand what I understood 7 years ago. We have to build a new jail. Now let's get moving. Let's do the right thing for the taxpayers. Let's work on the diversion center. That's between, quite honestly, Mike, you're a powerful person in this county and the administration. I can tell you right now, the council is 100% behind you in moving forward. And we heard from Mr. Mason today that they're in negotiation with the proper people to do that. So I think that's on its way. But to hold up this jail for another month and 2.8 million added on to the $20.8 million is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. The council has had it, and I'm speaking for them. I've talked to leadership. We have had it. So we want to move forward. Let's do it.
Jeff,
Mike,
this is Judge Sheehan. Can I weigh in?
But who are the two people that were involved in that case in the jail? Was that a mental health person? Was that person mentally ill that got killed? And the person that attacked him was also mentally ill? You can move forward on the jail. We are not, I'm with Mike on this. I am not opposed to moving forward today, but I sure as hell would like an assurance, okay? That diversion center is going to be built. I don't want to hear about its plans. I don't want to hear about, okay, listen, that's fine. We handle, the public defender's office handles every mental health case just about, okay? We've got a huge stockpile of cases. So that's extremely important to us. And I'm telling you that it will help the county if in fact you have a diversion center. It's going to help you on the jail side also. So all I'm asking is, and I think, I don't want to speak for Mike, all we're asking is that we need an assurance that that's going forward, okay? The diversion center. That does not preclude moving forward on the jail. I think the jails are fantastic. I think it's necessary, but I'm just very fearful it's going to, the other aspect of it's going to be washed away because the immediacy is not there. I think the immediacy is here today, and it was just reflected in those two people that were involved in that incident, and that happens every day. Maybe not deaths, but certainly mayhem in the jail, which is caused and attributable to a lot of mental health.
Jeff, this is Judge Sheehan talking. How are you?
Hold on a minute. Judge Sheehan, and go to Bill, okay? Judge Sheehan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, look, Mike O'Malley and Mark Stanton have made great points. I support moving forward, but and Mike Gallagher, you're a good guy and you're working hard too, but we don't need these ultimatums. Everyone should be working together on this. I think this moving forward, we get a chance to look at these options and we still can review and be concerned about O'Malley and Stanton's concerns. We don't need these ultimatums though. That's all I want to say.
Well, we're gonna vote and we'll see where we are on the vote. But Bill, I think that the one issue here is I think people are looking for the commitment stated again on diversion. I think I've heard the commitment, but Bill, if you can go ahead, or Armin, go ahead on just with the assurance on the diversion.
Yes, so certainly, we give you every assurance that the diversion center is moving forward. We spent a lot of time, money, and effort so far. We are currently within days of coming to an agreement with the provider. So I would say within the next 10 days, we will know a lot more than we know today publicly. But we are moving forward with this diversion center. It's going forward. We have the funding set aside for it. Certainly it's going to take a discussion with our council, but there's a large opioid settlement, if you recall, that $120 million was brought into the county that wasn't accounted for. And we intend to use some of that money to put the diversion center in place and get it up and operational. It's going to take a little bit to get up and operational, but we are funding it and we're putting the program together. We have an RFP out that we're going to be announcing probably next week.
Bob, did you? Yeah, I just wanted. Hello? Yeah, you're on. Use that mic.
An additional point to Mike O'Malley's concern about the diversion center. And one of the key concerns that I had a few months ago was that we were putting the cart before the horse, because until we had a diversion center, we wouldn't understand and know the impact on the jail population. And without knowing and understanding the impact on the jail population, you couldn't properly plan for the size of the jail. But they have adjusted their plans so that we can start with a jail population and a jail size, assuming that the diversion center is going to be a huge success. And then the way they've done it with a modular design, if for whatever reason we miss our estimates and the jail population is, 1,550, 1,700, it can be incrementally increased. But Mike, we can target the jail population based upon a successful diversion program. And if we don't do that, then we're going to continue, as Councilman Gallagher said, to throw $30 million down the pot on jail 1 and jail 2 in an unsafe condition. Now, as Mark points out, that's in some part due to a mental health population that could otherwise be diverted. But it is also due to the difficulty and the expense of having direct supervision in an antiquated jail not properly designed for that, which could lead to, incidents that we have seen in the recent past.
Okay, so thank you. The only other observation is I will tell you the presumptions, the assumptions we make in jail population, we will not sustain 1350 and below if we do not do diversion, bail reform, and the other things we're talking about. You will never hit those numbers consistently. So let's move on, Andy. We really are very far behind. That was a very important conversation. Very quickly, let's go through the site criteria because we do have to talk about this. I'm simply going to say this. If you look at the site criteria, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about this, the site criteria is consistent with everyone's site criteria that they've ever talked about with urban planning in jail. Obviously, things that are important are accessibility. It has to have access to public transport. And in each one of these cases, you have a scoring sheet from green to yellow and red. And when you score them, green is the best case. Red is, it may be, caution, this may really knock the site out. But the criteria, and you've seen it before, we don't have time to go through it now, but it's access.
It is attached to the agenda also.
It is attached to the agenda. You have it all there. Access to public transportation, and by the way, if it isn't there, if the stop isn't there, that would be involved dealing with RTA to make sure there's a stop there because this will be, there will be traffic. Parking, the concept being that anybody who goes there can easily park. Easy access to roadway, highway, so it's accessible, and we put a time frame as to how far from the core downtown, how long it would take to get there. Proximity to the courts, going back and forth, proximity to emergency services, which is always critical. Next slide, Andy. Next slide, Andy.
I'm getting there, Jeff.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Acquisition cost. What is the difficulty of acquiring an acquisition? It is true, unlike some of the issues that we're faced with the convention center, while we don't like to use it, there is the power of eminent domain here, but once again, we want to make this as easy and seamless as possible, which is ease of acquisition, the site, the configuration of the site, its constructability, its buildability, once we have an architect to start doing site fits, and the community context. We cannot put this in a place where it does not fit in well with the community. There have to be sufficient buffers for those aspects of it that would not fit in with the community. It's got to be viewed as a development positive, not a negative. And you look at various sites from that perspective. And what are and then there's a series of things that are just technical. Utilities, ability to get utilities there, all of the technical constructability issues, soil, drainage, are there hazardous materials that have to be abated, terrain conditions, all the environmental and historical issues, and then what impediment would there be to development for a particular site? Are there any issues, impediments to development, heavy objections because of something in an area? Keep in mind that the concept here is a campus, and there's also services provided at this campus. There's jobs provided at the campus. It's an economic development opportunity for certain communities that can be very positive. So those are the site criteria concepts. And once again, we'll have time to develop it. I don't think these are controversial. I think we can tweak these a little bit with your comments. but they've been out there for a while. So with that in mind, Andy, if we could go to the next slide. We're going to now move to going through these determinations. So, and let me just ask Steve Zanoni, have you had any public comment that anyone has on any of these determinations? None. Okay, so let's go down the list. Once again, determination number 1. The steering committee determines that it is impractical to renovate or expand existing jail 1 or jail 2, and that future jail planning should be limited to consideration of a new jail on a site outside of the downtown Cleveland core with an initial rated capacity to be determined, but not to exceed 1,600 beds, with flexibility for either reduction in initial size or future expansion to maximum rated capacity of 2,400 beds. We have had, a lot of the comment we've already had comment on this. I'm going to ask before we vote, is there any other comment from any steering committee member or delegate? I'm hearing none. We're seeing none. Okay, I'm going to ask for a vote.
Wait, Jeff, just check that Ms. Bates got back in. She got bounced off. I think I admitted her.
Okay, Ms. Bates, are you there? I can't tell.
I'm seeing her camera, but I'm not seeing a sign of a microphone.
Yes, I'm here.
She's here.
I'm here.
I just wanted to make sure you got back in, Ms. Bates.
Okay, and is Mr.
Yes, I'm in. Thank you.
Is Mr. Kelly there or his designee? Mr. McCormick, I think, who is voting for county council? Is that you, Mr. McCormick?
Yes, thank you. I'm here. I'm actually straddling 2 phone calls, but I am here.
Okay, well, we're about to go through the voting process, so we're gonna need your vote. So at this point in time, I'm going to ask for a motion by someone on the steering committee to move.
Jeff, I'll make the motion. This is Neela Bird. I'll make the motion.
Okay, in a second. Mr. Gallagher seconds the motion. So now I'm going to go for the passage of this determination. I'm sorry, for the passage of this determination. Okay, so now I'm going to go down the list and asking for votes on this. And we'll go down the list. Mr. Budish?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Ms. Bird?
Yes.
Judge Sheehan?
Yes.
Judge Celebrezzi?
Yes.
Judge Early?
Yes.
Ms. Long-Henry?
Yes.
Mr. McCormick?
Yes.
Designee for Sheriff Schilling? Yes, that's Bob. Ms. Bates?
Yes.
Mr. O'Malley? Mr. O'Malley? Yes. Okay. Mr. Stanton? Yes. Okay. 12-0. Thank you. Let's go to the next determination. Andy, if you could go to the next determination. Now, on this one, once again, this assumes we're going forward now with the new jail. And now we're continuing to consider 2 options for what we do about the courthouse. It's either a new standalone courthouse downtown, or it is renovation of the existing courthouse. Those are the 2 options that are left. We are not talking about a vertical new courthouse downtown, nor are we talking about moving the courthouse out of the downtown area to the 15 or 30 acre site. All right. So once again, we have no public comment. Any further? Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, but if we received a public comment. All right.
Jeff, one clarification. We're not talking about a new vertical jail downtown with the courthouse. You said, I'm just clarifying.
We're not.
No, you said, I was just clarifying, so.
Yeah. we can read this again, but basically what this says is we're limiting this to 2 future options, the ones I just mentioned. So once again, the steering committee determines that the preferred remaining options for consideration are for a new jail on a separate site. You've already voted for that, outside of the downtown Cleveland core, and either a new courthouse within the downtown core, or a new jail on a separate site once again, and renovation of the current building. We're still going to compare those side by side. That's what remains for our consideration. Okay. Once again, a motion that we move forward with this determination from the steering committee member. So moved. A second, Mr. Gallagher. Any further? And there's no further discussion. So once again, I'll go through the vote. Mr. Budish.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher. Yes. Ms. Byrd.
Yes.
Judge Sheehan.
Yes.
Judge Celebrezzi.
Yes.
Judge Early. Judge Early.
Sorry. Yes.
Ms. Langhenry.
Yes.
Mr. McCormick.
Yes.
For Sheriff Schilling, Bob. Yes. Ms. Bates.
Yes.
Mr. O'Malley.
Yes.
Is that a yes? I think that was a yes. Okay. And Mr. Stanton. Yes. Okay. Thank you. We have 12-0 on that. Let's go to number 3. And now the steering committee determines that the proposed siting criteria for the new jail is agreed to, and it's the criteria we've gone through and you've seen published is appropriate, and that the county should proceed to identify and provide a comparative evaluation of potential sites. Keep in mind that the concept is that there will be a point in time, some of this has to be confidentially, but there will be a point in time based on this criteria that you will be re-engaged on the site discussion. But obviously the investigation, there's some sensitivity to that, and that has to occur based on the criteria, and then we come back to the committee.
Jeff, one clarification to this determination. The date should be November 12th, 2020, not October 29th.
I'm sorry, that's right. I don't know how that got in there. So it's the meeting of today, obviously.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we'll make that change. Any further discussion on this? Motion? Mr. Gallagher moves. Second. And let's go ahead and vote once again. Mr. Budish?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Ms. Byrd?
Yes.
Judge Sheehan?
Yes.
Judge Celebrezzi?
Yes.
Judge Early?
Yes.
Ms. Langhenry?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
McCormick and yes.
Or Mr. McCormick, I'm sorry. Mr. Corey, on behalf of Sheriff Schilling. Ms. Bates?
Yes.
Mr. O'Malley?
Yes.
Yes, and Mr. Stanton. Okay, then let's go to the 4th determination.
Hey, 1 second, Jeff. I'm just fixing this so that we're clear. There you go.
Okay. So now what we're saying is, and once again, the steering committee determines that the county should proceed with planning for the new standalone jail, including, but not limited to, the following steps. So initiate the site exploration selection process, and of course that's according to the criteria that you've just approved. Prepare and issue the RFQ for the jail criteria architect, which, by the way, once it is prepared, it will be shared for comment with steering committee members and others. We're not going to issue it without at least letting you look at that. Number 3, commence work on the creation of the capital financing plan and structuring of required agreements with appropriate stakeholders, keeping in mind that we will continue to meet concurrently. The steering committee shall continue and conclude the initial planning for the courthouse to allow an informed decision regarding the most appropriate approach for meeting the current and future needs of the courts related agencies, although that, once again, now will be limited to those 2 options. Motion for passage of this 4th determination. Motion made by Mr. Gallagher, motion seconded. And let's vote on this. Mr. Budish?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Ms. Byrd?
Yes.
Judge Sheehan?
Yes.
Judge Celebrezzi?
Yes.
Judge Early?
Yes.
Ms. Langhenry?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
McCormick and yes.
McCormick, I keep doing that. Mr. McCormick, sorry. On behalf of the sheriff? Ms. Bates?
Yes.
Mr. O'Malley?
Yes.
Yes, and Mr. Stanton. Thank you. Really appreciate the time and attention, and with the clear understanding that diversion proceeds, and we're not leaving that behind as we move through this. So at this point in time, and I'm going to have, I just want to talk about next steps. So clearly right now, we have work to do at the county level to start going through the site selection process, because we can move ahead on that, and going through the other processes we talked about. We do want to re-engage on the discussion of the courts, and I am going to reach out to the judges to talk about, because now we have to go back to those issues, and I'm going to talk to Judge Sheehan and others about re-engaging. I know that once again, you still have your focus on what is going on with start of jury trials, but we do need to take some time to revisit where we last left the courts program. The courts program right now is a very large program. It's an expensive program, and we have to think about what we can do to make that far more affordable. So we're going to have to go down that exercise. I had a date set up, frankly, was going to talk about a date in early December for our next meeting. And part of that was, and I still think we may want to keep that to move forward. So Andy, I can't remember now. We talked about a date and I can't remember what it is. Do you remember the date? Or do you remember? So I'm simply going to tell you, we're going to talk through what the agenda will be, but I'm going to just right now mention that we're talking about the possibility of the next steering committee meeting being on December 17th. A Thursday, same time,
Correct.
Same place, same concept. Now, we're going to do some work to find out how far we can go with the agenda. It may be that we need to do more working group meetings with the courts before we're ready for that, but I just want to put it out there as a possible placeholder. We're going to be working very hard on all these next steps and to get ready for that. But that's my last comment about next steps. I want to say, however, I really appreciate everyone's time and attention, and I want to make one more comment. And I want to go back historically because it's on something that was a comment that I think that Mr. O'Malley made, and I think it was a good comment. There have been times in the past, not involved with the people in this room, where there have been things that the county launched off and did that did not have adequate study. For example, I inherited the Medical Mart project after the Medical Mart was a done deal. Were there really studies that talked about how effective that would be? Was it really studied in terms of the market? Probably not the way it should have been. This issue has been studied and studied and studied and studied. I don't think there's been an issue that has been more studied before a capital project than this issue. So I am pretty confident that the decisions you made today are based on a tremendous amount of data, a tremendous amount of information, and that you should be pretty proud about getting to 12-0 based on really rigorous studies. So I'm excited that we're going forward, and I thank everyone for your effort. Now we do have a comment. Steve, would you like to read the public? Is it one public comment? Two public comments. Now, Steve, you have to get to a point where you're at a microphone. We'll read those and then we'll adjourn. I'm sorry, I forgot about the public comment.
Thank you, Jeff. We've had two public comments. The first one is from Mr. William Tarter. And it says, good morning. I'm submitting these questions as a private citizen and not a representative of my employer. Question one, now that the decision has possibly been made to construct a jail campus outside of downtown Cleveland, what will be the public engagement strategy
that will occur alongside any site selection processes. Given that this is likely to be one of the largest expenditures of public dollars in recent memory, it is going to be critically important to have a public outreach strategy, get feedback and initial and input on potential sites. Any clarifications would be helpful.
Okay, I'm going to respond to that. And by the way, Andy, for some reason, you have an October 1, 2020 steering committee meeting. That's why. So let me tell you that, and if you go back to earlier meetings last year, we always talked about the fact that there would be a public engagement process, and there will be a public engagement process. That is part of the mission. That is part of what we have to put together. That is actually even part of the site selection process. So we will come back. It's a great question. It's clearly something that is part of this. And when we get to our next meeting, we will you may recall, we had previous discussion and committed to a public, that's actually part of the mission here. So we will come back to that as part of the next step forward. How we engage, what the public engagement process looks like will be part of what is presented. So thank you for that question.
We have a second question, question number 2. As I heard the conversation about jail populations, I remember reading recently about a proposal to build a regional jail involving the cities of Broadview Heights, Brecksville, Independence, and Seven Hills. Would this conversation affect the overall jail population numbers in the potential new county jail that was discussed this morning?
I'm going to answer this a couple ways. At this point in time, the knowledge that we're going to do this county jail, we have always talked about how we can take services in the county, how we can take different players and talk about how one can save money, consolidate services. There needs to be conversations with others in the community about how we might be able to consolidate services. I'm not going to go beyond that. Central booking is a key to this. There are some, municipalities or home rule municipalities, they get to act in the way they want, but the collaboration conversation has to take place. And that's as far as I'll take that right now. It would be a shame to be duplicating facilities if you didn't need to.
And I have one last.
Jeff, if we may point out, the intent of this diversion initiative also is to be countywide.
That's right. I mean, we've talked about how we can take diversion, how we can take central booking, and we've had a lot of conversations about how that can be expanded. I mean, diversion alone involves training of local police forces. There's a lot of elements of diversion that is countywide, and that's a big part of that conversation.
I have a comment, which is from Reverend E. Regis Bunch. Hi, Justice Center Executive Committee. Here's how Los Angeles County helped to redo their jail plan by looking at decarceration/diversion first. LA County was able to move from incarceration to diversion-centered approach. Here is a link to the LA County's full website devoted to alternatives to incarceration, and it's fiscally responsible in that it's not wasting dollars, but helping the individuals versus helping a guilty.
Thank you for that comment. I do want to point out that in our first months, some of you were not involved, but we spent many hours looking at those and other programs and presenting them. We had Karen Shin and others talk about the necessity of diversion. So in our prior meetings, the necessity of dealing with diversion, the commitment to diversion, we had those meetings prior to COVID. We're not backing away from that. As you've heard, that's the reason that the county right now is looking at alternatives to this. I don't think there's anybody on this committee that is not completely committed to maximizing diversion opportunities, because we all recognize it's not just the right thing to do. It creates the best outcomes. And frankly, if you wanted to just be a very cold-hearted and just about the dollars, it saves money. So thank you for the comment, and I do recommend people look at that and look at the tours that we had, the recordings on the tours that we've had of diversion facilities. It's part of the DNA of the project that needs to be going forward. Any other public comment? Any other comment from anybody on the call? If not only are we adjourned, but we are adjourned early, representing that we can perform not only on time, but ahead of time. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Jeff. See ya.
Mhm.